Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 4th of March 2025 and these are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest as far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned. A lot has been happening, especially when it comes to the US front. Now, the US President Donald Trump is pausing all kinds of military aid to Ukraine after the meeting that he held in the Oval Office with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. We all know, we all watched that, we all saw the repercussions of that as well, where J.D. Vance and the US President were sitting with Zelensky. Now, Washington is reviewing whether billions of dollars given to Kiev are also contributing to any kind of solution to end Ukraine's war against invading Russian forces. This has been said, quote unquote, by a White House official. A lot of talks are going on also as far as the European Union is concerned with Zelensky as well. Zelensky was, of course, part of a meeting that happened within the ambit of the EU, wherein many of the members of the EU pledged their support to Zelensky. What is going to happen at the end of the day? If the US withdraws its complete support for Zelensky, will this pave the way for a more robust EU-Ukraine alliance? Will the ceasefire or any kind of pact between Russia and Ukraine finally happen or not? This and more will be discussed in our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns polio, and of course another report which concerns the US government, which of course talks about its withdrawing aid as far as the WHO is concerned. And when it comes to WHO, it also includes polio amongst other debilitating diseases. And when it comes to polio, there are only two countries in the world that currently have polio cases. One is Afghanistan, the other Pakistan. We've had a number of cases last year, and even this year we've had 6 cases so far. We are just in the month of March. Will this impact Pakistan's polio program, or will other countries take the place, like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that has also stepped in as far as the Pakistan's polio program is concerned? And we'll also be highlighting different aspects of this debilitating disease in our second segment. Then we'll be talking about you remember in 2019 there was a EU Disinfo Lab report that came which highlighted how India had been using different maneuvers in order to destabilize Pakistan or put Pakistan in a bad light. This EU Disinfo Lab report had different links with a certain Srivastava group. Now, the brother of the head of that Srivastava group, Ankit Srivastava, has also been involved, as per many media outlets in Canada, in secret activities in the country that is Canada. And of course, we all know the spat that is happening between India and Canada. And this is just another chapter in that whole revelation. Will that lead to more stress or more, more of a strained relationship between India and Canada? That only time will tell. This is going to be our last story. So let's begin with today's show with our first segment, and that concerns the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We are day 1104 of that very conflict. We've been joined by 2 guests to discuss that in detail. In this, we've been joined by Fraz. Naqvi is a foreign policy expert. Thank you very much, Fraz, to have joined us. And online, we've been joined by Bryza, who's a former State Department official and an ambassador, as a former ambassador as well. We'll be beginning with Fraz. Fraz, the US President has paused, and that was a huge news everywhere, whether it be in Pakistan or internationally, all kinds of military aid for Ukraine. We all remember the Oval meeting that happened on Friday. We all saw how the accusations were also hurled during the course of that meeting. As far as the halting of the military aid is concerned, for the moment there's no reaction from Zelensky or his office, but of course the reaction will come. What consequences, in your point of view, is this going to have for Ukraine and this very conflict?
Thank you so much. Well, if we look at the first presidency of Donald Trump, we see that there has been quite a lot of strain in the transatlantic relations. So the US push during the second era of Donald Trump to halt the military aid to Ukraine shouldn't be a surprising factor for any of us. But the way in which it occurred, I think that would be a source of concern, not only for the EU, but the entire global order in terms of security, because we see that US is the largest and the greatest security provider for many of these states in the Europe as well as in the Middle East as well. So it might follow the similar sort of situation in other arenas of the world. It might follow in the East Asian region with respect to South Korea and Japan as well. But there are some reports, specifically in terms of Ukraine, that the figure of $300 billion was not accurate. In fact, the total amount of aid that the US has supplied and that actually helped the Ukrainian forces on ground, that was less than $100 billion. The other one sort of an indirect manner in sort of the infrastructural development as well as humanitarian aid, but specifically in the military domain, it is less than $100 billion. So I think that it might lead to some sort of compromise from the European part as well as the Ukrainian part.
The European part is not willing to, invest as much as the US has been investing. But apparently, as per the reports, what you were saying as well, the EU has been giving more or less as much as the US. But if the US backs out, that puts more pressure on the EU to give more.
Well, you see, because of the huge reliance and the greater reliance of European countries on the US military apparatus, the military infrastructure of the European state has been depleted for quite some decades. So I think what I'm talking about in terms of compromise is that the European partners of US might try to convince Ukraine in terms of acceding to the demands of Donald Trump and his vice presidents, because we have seen that Zelensky is not ready to back down. But we are also pretty much aware, and through a rational thinking, we are aware that without the help of US military support, the European partners could not be able to sustain the Russian military force and military might.
Right.
So there are reports that EU might pledge to send at approximately 30,000 troops in Ukraine, but it doesn't matter, because if those 30,000 troops are across the Ukrainian and Russian border, and if only a singular patch is missing from where the Russian forces might invade, the objective of placing those 30,000 troops is of no use. It could not be applicable without the air support of US, which the European partners do not have currently.
All right. We've also been joined by Matthew. Matthew, thank you for joining us. Matthew, Donald Trump accuses Zelensky of not wanting peace as long as he has America's backing, quote unquote. And of course, this withdrawing of military aid is going to have a serious consequence as far as this whole conflict is concerned. We all know what happened on Friday, where the meeting between Trump and Zelensky soured quickly, and it was being broadcast live, so everybody watched it. And Trump was repeatedly also cutting off Zelensky and accusing him of gambling with the World War III. How do you see this tiff, let's put it that way, between Zelensky and Donald Trump? Is the withdrawing of US military aid a consequence of that, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think we're seeing Trump being motivated, along with Vance, the vice president, by the arrogance of ignorance. They don't understand international security. They don't want to understand that what Putin wants to do is to compel Zelensky to stop fighting now, so Russia can lock in its military gains, its seizure of Ukrainian territory, and then use the pause to rearm and keep going. So it's a combination of Trump not liking Zelensky for a number of reasons that date back to Trump's impeachment in his first administration, but also that Trump, again, because he doesn't understand what's actually happening in the war, thinks that somehow Zelensky does not want peace because he won't accept the deal, right? Trump believes he's the world's greatest deal maker, when in reality, what Zelensky is saying is, essentially, think of it this way. A group of bandits breaks into your home. They occupy part of your house and they kill members of your family. And then the police come and say, okay, now you should make peace with those people while they occupy your house and continue killing your family. In that simple terms, that's the way that I think the Ukrainians look at it. But Trump doesn't. Trump just sees his deal. And if anybody resists him because he's so brilliant, he's furious.
Well, I understand that, but that has regional consequences as far as the global north is concerned, and with the EU also extremely concerned about all of this, and they're pushing Zelensky to patch it up with the US. A White House official says, and I quote, and you've been a former White House official, so I mean, it's interesting. He says, the president has been clear that he's focused on peace and he needs partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution. Is this contributing to a solution?
No, it's bringing forward the risk of a broader war that could spiral into Russian attacks on NATO territory and then World War III. Trump, again, he doesn't understand how international relations works. He understands real estate deals, and he thinks, the deal in this case is a ceasefire. But he doesn't understand that that deal is only going to lead to Putin restarting the war, because he can't have it both ways. What Trump had said was he wanted to meet with Putin first because Putin didn't want to stop fighting, and so he had to entice Putin to the negotiating table. Now he's saying it's Zelensky that doesn't want peace and wants to keep fighting, when it's the Ukrainians that want peace more than anybody.
All right, that's interesting. Coming to you, Fraz, Trump had a huge issue with Zelensky because he made a comment against Russia's invading forces. And he said this, that the end of the country's war with Russia was still very, very far away. And that irked Trump because he wanted a quick solution and a quick end to this current war. And he said, and I'm going to quote Donald Trump, he said, if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long. Then, of course, we had Zelensky's reaction also as well, saying that we are working together with the US and our European partners and very much hope on US support on the path to peace. Peace is needed as soon as possible. How do you view these statements? I mean, contradictory statements, but from the Trump side, they are very strong and they indicate a certain direction where Zelensky might be going. What's your take on that?
Well, if we look from the individual perspective of President Donald Trump, he views President Putin of Russia as a great leader. But when it comes to the Ukrainian president, he terms Ukrainian president as a dictator without a valid mandate and because of the excuse of delaying the elections. So we have seen that Donald Trump has the soft corner for Russia for various reasons, and I think the most prominent of that reason is that to keep Russia in loop, to tackle the rising China in terms of economy, and the way Donald Trump has initiated the trade war with China in his previous tenure. So I think it is very important and crucial for Donald Trump to make ease or to some sort of deal with the Russian counterparts, and that is why we have seen the meeting of foreign ministers of both Russia and US has been taken place in Riyadh quite a couple of weeks ago. So I think it is quite important to understand, because from the Donald Trump perspective, he views the global arena not as a US-Russia competition, but rather the new emerging great game that is between US and China. And in terms of economy, as my colleague in the US has mentioned, that from the real estate perspective, from the economic perspective, and from the perspective of a businessman, he views the international relations, and that is why the security and the military might of Russia is no threat as per the Donald Trump perspective, but the rising economy of China might give a tough competition to the economy of the US.
All right. Well, let's see how things bode along. Matthew, I'd like to understand something. How does the EU step in now that the military aid to Ukraine has been stalled or withdrawn? Trump has made it clear that the US is not going to provide any kind of security guarantees for Ukraine, urging Europe's military forces, in fact, to take charge instead. Now, we know there has been a very important meeting of European leaders and Zelensky of late as well. What I'd like to understand is, can the EU or Europe meaningfully provide a security cover to Ukraine without the backing of the US? What are, in your point of view, Europe's true security capabilities, and how dependent is the region on US support?
Well, Europe has tremendous possibilities, right? Potential military support capacity, and of course economic support. I mean, it's the biggest economy in the world if you take all the EU member states together. What they need is to be able to come up with political will and an agreed plan, and that's what UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was trying to do with his meeting at Lancaster House in London on Sunday. What came out of that was a proposal by French President Emmanuel Macron for there to be a 1-month ceasefire meaning in the air, at sea, and then on energy infrastructure, but not on land. And the European leaders haven't really embraced that idea of a ceasefire. So now they're saying, okay, let's take the money, the frozen assets that we have in European banks, it's basically interest on the frozen Russian assets, and use that to help Ukraine finance the production of its weapons and the production of weapons and ammunition in Europe to help Ukraine. That can go a long way, and Ukraine will continue fighting no matter what Donald Trump says. But as Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski said in the last few days, Ukraine could probably keep fighting with the stockpiles it has of weapons and ammunition for 6 months or so. But after that, it will get really difficult. Now, even if, however, my last point, even if Europe does come up with a clear plan and is able to provide more financial assistance and weapons for Ukraine, there still are military capacities that only the United States has in sufficient numbers within NATO. And that largely involves the air. So it involves air defenses. It involves airlift, so moving troops and equipment by aircraft. It involves also satellites, the Starlink satellite system that provides Ukraine the crucial connectivity to be able, and intelligence sharing that allows Ukraine to be able to target Russian forces in an asymmetric way using Ukraine's innovative drone capabilities against massed Russian troops. The U.S. is the only one that can really provide those factors.
All right, that's interesting. Coming back to you, Fraz, I'd like to understand this perspective. They think that Zelensky doesn't want to enter into a peace deal. And that is why they are pushing Zelensky or Ukraine into a corner so that he might relent and enter that peace deal with Russia. Zelensky says he believes Kiev's relationship with Washington could still be salvaged. He said that he's ready to sign a minerals deal. You remember that famous minerals deal that the US wanted to sign because the US said that they had invested at that moment $500 billion, if I'm not wrong, the amount that was cited. He said that Zelensky says he believes Washington also wants still to sign that minerals deal as well. Is there some kind of relenting towards the US from the Ukrainian side in the form of him agreeing to this mineral deal? Is there more to it, or maybe this will come up one step at a time? What do you think?
Well, first we need to understand four perspectives in this Ukraine-Russian conflict. From the US perspective, under the administration of Donald Trump, he wants Ukraine to enter the deal on US conditions. Whatever been decided between the two great powers of Russia and US, the Zelensky or the Ukrainian government has to accept it. That is the US perspective. Zelensky is of the view that first we have to make some sort of ceasefire or truce so that Russian forces would withdraw from the occupied Ukrainian territory, and then the pathway to the peace talks could be envisaged. Russia wants that under no condition any of the NATO member country would place its troop alongside the Ukrainian Russian border, because it would because it was the very basic reason why Russia first invaded into the Ukraine. The European perspective, on the other hand, is to somehow make a makeshift arrangement between the Ukrainians and the Americans to compromise on the middle ground so as to pressurize the Russian and to make this peace deal a fair one. So I think these are the four very contrasting views. But I think the Ukrainian government is pretty much aware of the fact that no matter what it does, no matter how it reflects itself to be very determined, resistant and brave and bold against the Russian forces, it is very well aware that without the cover of US air support and the missile system, it cannot survive more than a few months against the Russian troops. And I think that this is the very basic reason why, despite of the humiliation that Zelensky faced in the Oval Office, he is trying to impress upon the Washington that he is still ready to sign or to compromise some sort of its previous demands, so that at any cost US might enter to safeguard the territory as well as the government of the current Ukrainian regime.
All right. A last question to you, Matthew, and I'd like to understand the French perspective on it all. French President Emmanuel Macron, who you cited in your response as well, in an interview with the French newspaper Le Figaro, says France and the UK have agreed that there should be a month-long truce in Ukraine. I repeat, a month-long truce in Ukraine. And French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot says a truce between Russia and Ukraine on air, sea and energy infrastructure, if accepted, could allow Ukraine and its allies to determine if Russian President Vladimir Putin is acting in good faith. He also said something that is very interesting. He said that the Ukraine front lines are keep on getting closer to us, that is to the EU, heightening the chance of a European war. To add to that, I'd like to understand the NATO angle to it all, because of which the whole conflict began. Donald Trump does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO, but a lot of European countries still are, in favor of Ukraine joining NATO. In all of this, potpourri, let's put it that way, who will emerge victorious? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a month-long truce? Is Ukraine going to be part of NATO? What's your take?
Well, I think probably there is not going to be a month-long truce because, as I mentioned before, other European leaders who participated in the meeting that Keir Starmer convened in London on Sunday have not been supportive of the idea, including Starmer himself, because those European leaders fear that any pause in the fighting simply gives the Russian side more time to regroup and rearm and then be ready to take more Ukrainian territory later. However, personally, I do see the merit in testing Putin's commitment actually to pursuing a peace agreement in good faith by calling such a truce. But I don't think that's going to happen. You asked for a prognosis of the future. I don't think that's going to happen. I believe that if Ukraine survives, Ukraine will eventually be a member of NATO, but not until after Donald Trump is gone. The other opponent of Ukrainian membership for NATO had been Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, and he's now going to be out of office within a few days. And his replacement, the CDU's Merz, I think will probably take a more hawkish approach to Ukraine's membership in NATO. Finally, I'd like to say it's important to understand the deep psychological symbolism and operational importance of France and the UK convening this meeting, more or less, because they're Europe's two nuclear powers. And it's nuclear weapons that are the ultimate deterrent of Russia. And if you watch carefully Russian rhetoric, when they want to try to frighten the Europeans and intimidate them and split them from the Europeans, the Russian side threatens to use nuclear weapons. So it's the deterrent of the nuclear forces of France, the UK, and ultimately the United States that is the ultimate deterrent of Russia. If you don't have the U.S. commitment to NATO and the nuclear deterrent, it becomes much less likely that the West collectively will be able to deter President Putin from using nuclear weapons, and therefore brings even a nuclear war closer to reality. It's also crucial to understand that while the UK is a nuclear power, it does not own its submarine-based Trident missiles. Those are owned by the United States and leased by the United Kingdom. So if you take the US out of the equation in terms of nuclear weapons, the ability of NATO to deter Putin is gravely undermined and war is more likely.
All right. So a lot of complexities that are arising out of this very situation, and a lot of question marks also emanate from different angles as to where all of this is going. Maybe the coming days will give us more clarity as far as this is concerned. But in the meantime, thank you so very much, Matthew Bryza, former State Department official and former ambassador, former White House official as well, to have joined us all the way on online, and to Fraz, Naqvi, foreign policy expert, to have come all the way to the studios to have joined us to discuss this very, very important issue, which I think has entered a very crucial phase, not an interesting phase, but a very crucial phase. We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Our second segment today concerns polio, the debilitating disease that still is present in two countries, only two countries across the world, and that are Afghanistan and Pakistan. A lot of polio programs have been started by the government. This year also in February, there was a polio program that has begun all across the country. And the fact is that the government wants it to be eliminated by the end of 2025. But will it happen really is the question that we all have. On top of it, on the global front, with the US backing out of WHO, it is causing a dent as far as important health-based programs, and specifically that of polio and other diseases, are going to be affected and have been affected so far. What is that going to bode as far as the future of all the countries that rely on different kinds of programs to get their health programs going? Is what we are going to discuss in this very segment. We've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by Dr. Hassan Orooj. He's a former DG Health. Thank you very much to have joined us. And online, we'll be joined by Dr. Hamid, Director Polio Eradication with the World Health Organization as well. Let's begin with you, Dr. Hassan Orooj. This, polio, I'll begin with Pakistan's case, to be very frank. When you look at 2024 and 70 plus cases, 74 if I'm not wrong, that have emerged from different cities of Pakistan, 23 from Sindh, 22 Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 1 each from Punjab and Islamabad, 27 from Balochistan, the highest number of cases. This year as well, we've got 6 cases that have emerged so far, and this is an alarming number because only more or less 2 months have passed in this year. In your point of view, why is that? Are our programs not effectively working?
Thank you very much, firstly, Omar Sahab, for calling me here. The thing is that we have to see the issue holistically. Polio program is being run for years and years now, but the situation in Pakistan and Afghanistan, only 2 countries, as we already know, are left with polio virus. I think vaccine hesitancy among public, in a situation of security somewhere, because off and on, although we don't have much of the attacks on the polio teams, we have already lost hundreds of lives for the poor polio workers during the campaign, but still we have some patchy incidences somewhere in 2 months or 3 months that affects the polio. And third is misconceptions which are still roaming around around the polio vaccine and virus and all these things. So the KPK government has taken very good steps. I think they have now issued some some punishments for the parents who are not complying with the vaccination.
Not to issue birth death certificates as well as marriage certificates.
That's right. CNIC and marriage certificates and birth deaths. So I think I'm saying for quite some time now, because this has to be done. It has to be balanced between carrot and stick. We have to have our services, best quality vaccinators, vaccines, doorstep vaccination. On the other side, the law has to be conducive to compel certain groups which are resisting the polio especially.
All right. Dr. Hassan, despite global efforts to eradicate this virus, there are huge challenges such as security issues, vaccine hesitancy, you've pointed that out, misinformation that have also slowed progress. How important is it for governments to, highlight these very challenges and make the parents understand the importance of giving polio drops to the children under the age of 5 and also to have them immunized against all the diseases, including polio? And in your point of view, why is there misinformation? Why is there resistance amongst certain parents?
Very important, critical. I mean, your question, I would say, this is so important to highlight, to clear the misconceptions, change the frame of mind of the parents. Because parents are responsible for the children. I mean, if the parent is not ready, and believe you me, I have met during my DG-ship, I met the parents who are highly literate. They are resistant and they are very difficult to change their attitude and to their approach. So I think the responsibility lies with you. You are one of those programs which time and again take this topic and discuss. In every channel, I see only monotonous political things are going on.
I think these issues are more important.
This is very important to, we have examples from other countries. When they eradicated polio, after every 10 minutes, there used to be a public figure or a misconcept clarification which used to come on the television. You know, the behaviors don't change with soft measures. You have to be very intense media campaigns. So media campaigns, social media, or one-to-one interpersonal communications, schools can play a very important role in high-level policy makers. They have to be sensitized because everybody has either children or grandchildren in their houses.
And they need to be made to understand that polio is a crippling disease, and to avoid it, the only way is to either get the drops and to also get the inoculation against polio, which is part of a number of other diseases as well. And
there is no treatment for polio. The only treatment is prevention.
True, I agree with you on that. We were talking about the importance of getting the polio drops and the importance of the children getting inoculated. Leave alone the polio drops, there are parents who don't want to get their children inoculated as well, not only against polio but against all the other diseases as well. And as you said, there is no cure as far as polio is concerned. The only prevention is through the polio drops or through the polio vaccine. Misconceptions is something I want to really highlight, Dr. Hassan, because the fact is that as you said, even there are so many literate people that are present in Pakistan and across different countries that fail to understand the importance of inoculating their children. And there are different misconceptions, whether it be sterilizing the children by giving polio drops or other misconceptions that we don't know. There are governments in the West that will be surveying our children if this vaccine is given or if the polio drops are given. Why are there such misconceptions? Who is behind it, and how can this be countered?
There are two things, Omar Saab. One is that these misconceptions because of your culture, because we have a sort of a frame of mind that everything which is from the West is sort of not good for us. That could be a conspiracy theory, or they are meant for the sterilization of the children, or they have some other motives. Although these polio drops, let me, from your platform, reassure the public that these polio drops are highly sensitive, very high quality, and the entire world is using the same polio drops which are being imported in Pakistan. And these are imported polio drops. So these misconceptions from the other cluster groups are by design, who are against the polio. Whatever you polio campaigns and whatever you try to convince them, even if they are doctors or they are highly literate, as we mentioned, they will not be convinced at all. So we have to target them, we have to pinpoint them, identify them, meet them and target them. Because unless they are targeted, this social media campaigns against the polio vaccine will continue, and we are going to actually success story turns into failure sometimes.
True, I agree. I'd like to refer to our current government, our Prime Minister, who launched the year's first nationwide anti-polio campaign in the beginning of February, which ran between the 3rd and the 9th of February. He said that he highlighted the importance of polio, said that our team is a very dedicated one, will work day and night to eradicate the disease and will reach the far-flung areas in the villages as well. 45 million children earlier this month, last month, were inoculated against the polio virus. When you talk of the resolve of our administration, of our government, of our leaders to eradicate polio, how do you view this resolve? And when you look at the cases despite this resolve, what needs to be done in order to make this resolve a reality?
Right, a very important question, because there is definitely no doubt about the resolve or the commitment of the government and very senior policy makers up to the level of Prime Minister. The thing is that polio drops are being administered by the polio workers. So we have to have very quality campaigns at the street level. The poor worker who is going door to door, what he's getting, what is his motivation, how clean he is, how the people are responding or reacting towards him. We have to see his problems as well. And also, I think they get very less amount in terms of payment, because if the polio workers are a bit better paid, I think their motivation will increase. So micro-planning, grassroots level changes which could be brought are the turning points. Policies, we have very good policies, we have very good plans, we have Emergency Operations Center, a Polio Eradication Center at the federal level. All the chief ministers are being directed by the Prime Minister. I think there's a very good structure for the entire world that deputy commissioners and commissioners are also involved in the entire Pakistan as focal point, which has made a difference. There's no doubt about it, because they are the administrative bosses and they have the resources, the vehicles and the human resource to depute in the polio campaigns. But I think, to me, the micro-planning is the core, the spinal cord of the polio campaign.
From micro-planning to the exact disease, you know, I always ask you this question, but I think the more the better, because the more people understand what it's all about, the more they will feel the need to inoculate their children. What is poliomyelitis? How does it spread? Why is, in your point of view, a sudden rise in cases in Pakistan, 74 last year and 6 to date? And are these polio cases in any way related to the polio cases that are also emanating in Afghanistan? Your take, and also why Balochistan is an area where we are getting more cases than the other areas in Pakistan?
Let me first tell you that these polio viruses have come up from the historically recognized reservoirs, either in Karachi or in Badin or...
What do you mean by reservoir?
Okay, polio has certain polio virus has certain clusters. It is not like every city, God forbid, is infected. There are certain population segments which are more infected than others, and some are absolutely non-infected. These are known as the reservoirs where the polio virus, either the environmental sample is positive or the polio case is positive for years and years. And the polio virus is circulating in the children under the age of 5 years in that special population segment in Karachi or Quetta or Peshawar. That is known as a reservoir. The polio is not getting eradicated there. So,
and why is that?
Well, we talked about vaccine hesitancy, misconcepts, and some of the insecurity issues. By the way, your first question, the polio virus is, as you said, it is poliomyelitis. It is an RNA virus. There are two types of, so it is an RNA virus. It is highly contagious. And time and again, since it is present in the environment, as we say that environmental samples are positive, every child is being attacked. The child which have less immunity, they get polio as a disease. And this disease becomes crippling if it overwhelms their immunity. And it paralyzes the limbs and the arms. And sometimes when it attacks the lungs, it could lead to death. So this is polio, and it is ingested, it is spread through orophycal route. The child excretes poliovirus in the stools. And if the hygienic habits are not good, and the environment is not clean, so if you are using the toilet and without washing the hands, you're feeding the child or making the meals, etc. So there is a very high chance that the polio virus will spread from one child to another.
All right. And you talked about these concentrated areas called reservoirs where these cases are always present. If these cases were always present, why is there an increase in the number of cases in Pakistan in the last few years?
Pakistan is a highly populous country, and there is a huge inter-provincial and inter-city movement. So, as I mentioned to you, you know why adults are told to take polio vaccine when they go for Umrah in Saudi Arabia? Because they could be carriers. They don't suffer.
It has been recently reimposed by
absolutely. They do not suffer from the disease polio, but they carry the virus and they can infect the virus through excretion in the stools. So movement of the people is very important, and as I said, that because of business, a job, or traveling, or tourism, people move from Karachi to Khyber and from one place to another. And this epidemiological block also gives us a lesson. why polio is in Afghanistan and Pakistan, because the movement of the people is quite rampant, number one. Number two, we are unable to eradicate polio in either of the border areas, although there have been very substantial and targeted campaigns there. But it has not been zero polio. And the zero cases has to be addressed. By zero cases, I mean that the parents who have either ran away from getting the polio vaccine to their children, or they were absent when the team visited them, or they refused. But the most dangerous of them are those who have not refused and are silent zero cases. Because we don't know there is a child under 5 years of age in this house, and the teams mark them as clear, but there's a child which is unvaccinated. Another important piece I would like to pinpoint is the expanded program of immunization. Every country has its routine immunization program.
True.
Unfortunately, our EPI program has not been very strong, because polio is part and parcel of those 8-9 vaccines which every child gets.
So this is what you are saying, that this program also needs to be strengthened in your point of view.
Very much strengthened.
All right. We have now been joined by Dr. Hamid Jafari, Director Polio Eradication, WHO. Dr. Hamid, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Wonderful. I'd like to understand from your perspective, the withdrawal of the US from WHO, how has this impacted efforts, including, the polio program, which concerned Pakistan and Afghanistan, and other disease-related programs as well, and how is the WHO coping with this?
So I think in terms of the first part of your question, this obviously, as you know, that the US Centers for Disease Control is one of the core implementing partners within the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. And they are a technical and strategic partner, but they're also a funding partner as well. And then also some of the funding to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative comes through the USAID. So I think the implications for the WHO and for the Global Polio Eradication Initiative are at multiple levels. When you look at the strategic and technical partnership of CDC with WHO and other UNICEF and the other entire GPI, it's very, very important. Their technical support, their analytic support, the specialized laboratory for polio viruses, the Global Specialized Reference Laboratory, is at CDC, and that's the one that maintains the quality assurance and produces reagents for the global poliovirus laboratory network. So that laboratory is sort of a nerve center of the poliovirus surveillance system. CDC epidemiologists and public health experts are very much integral parts of the program, and they are currently not able to work with the program. And then there is loss of funding, of course, which is significant. So about 15% or so of the program budget is dependent on US government funding. And so its impact on WHO and on the program is already quite significant. WHO itself is putting in even more cost containment measures, and we are trying to find cost efficiencies. Of course, the priority is to maintain the polio eradication program in the what we call consequential geographies, and the highest priority within those consequential geographies are, of course, Pakistan and Afghanistan, the only two countries that remain endemic for polio. CDC funding supports many of the positions in WHO and UNICEF of technical experts. Both national and international experts are supported. So we've had to look for other partner and sources of funding to be able to preserve the staffing and the core functions of the program. I hope that gives you a sense of how we are managing.
All right. Last question to you, Dr. Hamid. You have said that if this funding shortfall continues, it could delay eradication of important diseases such as polio and may lead to more children being affected by the disease. How in your point of view, is the WHO now going to move forward under these current circumstances with these lacunas pending to ensure that this does not happen?
I think obviously many important strategies. I think the first and foremost is that we need to make rapid progress in stopping polio in Pakistan and Afghanistan and outbreaks of polio or vaccine-derived virus that are happening elsewhere in the country. But for Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's particularly important to stop polio as soon as possible, get the program back on track, because the longer the program lasts, the more costly it is, and of course, more children get paralyzed. So that's number one, is improving the quality of the program and addressing some of the issues that I heard your previous speaker highlight of where we are missing children in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I think reaching those missed children is the most important way to manage this funding shortage. These funding shortages are going to get more complicated. That means that we have to actually identify more cost efficiencies, most return for the investments that are being made in these programs, make tough decisions to really focus on quality in the priority areas to get the maximum return on these investments. Then ultimately, we are, of course, looking at other donors and partners to step in. No one entity or group can actually make up for the loss of US government funding, but of course, there could be it would have a huge mitigating effect. So I think the timing of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia stepping in at this time with their pledge of $500 million over the next 5 years for the Global Polio Eradication Initiative is very timely. And we are hoping that many of the donors, particularly from our region itself and other countries, will step up. And it may become necessary that even Pakistan, the amount of funding that the government of Pakistan puts into this program will have to be increased to make up for loss of international funding.
All right. You wanted to add to it, but a very short one.
I'll just try to add that we have to have our in-house in order. In addition to dependence on the international agencies like WHO, UNICEF, World Bank, US funding, we need to have social corporate responsibilities and the big businesses coming into public-private partnership. We have seen these cases in environment, CO2. These businesses have really changed the shape of the healthcare programs because now we have to see that we should be self-dependent rather than dependence on the rest of the world.
All right. Self-dependency is what is the need of the day under the current circumstances. Thank you very much to Dr. Hamid Jafari, Director, Polio Eradication, World Health Organization, to have joined us. It was a pleasure listening to you and talking to you. And of course, our very dear friend, Dr. Hassan Orooj, former DG Health, who have come all the way to the studios to discuss polio. We'll continue to discuss polio and we'll continue to highlight the importance of this crippling disease. Lastly, before we go, I just wanted to talk about this Srivastava group and the EU Disinfo Lab and the whole, Pakistan's destabilization and Pakistan's, image narrative that was being built up by India through this group and others. Now, what has happened is that in Canada, Ankit Srivastava, the brother of the head of the EU Disinfo, of the Srivastava group, in fact, that was linked to the EU Disinfo Lab report, has been found to be involved in secret activities in Canada. This is not us, this is Canadian media that is talking about it. And various reports have come out as far as this is concerned. This group has offices everywhere, whether it be in Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, and associated with newspapers and oil and gas industry businesses. The Canadian national security officials say that this group and its senior officials are involved in covert activities. And they, whether it be by bribing politicians, whether it be by maligning Pakistan, and the agenda goes on and on. The group websites of the Srivastava group are also being used to spread fake news, and these websites have been intended to influence Canadian public opinion and the electoral process. A lot of insinuations and allegations that have come as far as the Srivastava group is concerned, and that comes after, of course, the 2019 allegation of the EU Lab and the Srivastava group's involvement then, and of course Ankit Srivastava's involvement now. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.